Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome, and welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness. I am just going to talk a little bit about the sun. I love this flower behind me. It reminds me of the sun. We're going to talk about solar activity. If you've seen these videos before, some of this will be redundant. I'm going to add some more information in here. And then towards the end of the video, I might actually go into a little flow and actually tune into the earth and the sun and the energies of what this means collectively for us. I think that would be kind of fun. So if you haven't seen these videos before, I talk about solar flares a lot. It's kind of something that I've been really tuned into for years, and I'll explain why in this video. In addition to that, I am an intuitive and I'm an energy healer. And I like to share in these videos my experience to maybe bring awareness to others who are watching this video and to be helpful in this journey of expansion that we're all on together. So when I do an intuitive reading, I'm tuning into and I'm using my multisensory awareness. And that's something that I'm very passionate about showing others how to use. So when I'm channeling, that's me tuning into, through my multisensory awareness, the energies that I have access to that may be beneficial for all of us here on Earth. And that's my hope in sharing this on this channel. I'll start off a little bit with the simple stuff and get it out of the way. We have a lot of solar activity right now. In case you haven't noticed, it's all over the internets. And I'm excited about this because for years I've been sharing solar flare. You might be feeling this because of a solar flare, and I jokingly blame everything on solar flares. I don't blame everything on solar flares, but I do use it as a lot of validation for what some of us are going through. So let's talk about that briefly. What are some of the feelings and again, if you want to skip this part, I completely understand and maybe get to the juice at the end. But some of us don't realize how much of an impact it has on our physical bodies. And that's the important stuff because this is about empowering us. This is about us utilizing what's happening in our environment to help us understand we are connected to all things. When we have this type of activity with our star, our sun impacts not only Earth, but it impacts our physical bodies. When we have a full moon, it is statistically a fact that there are more car accidents, there are more babies born, there are more people that go to the hospital. There's a lot of things that happen more around the full moon. More people are arrested. And so it's silly if we just blow that off as nonsense. Why is that? Well, if the moon is affecting the pull of the earth, our bodies are 70% water. We are a vessel holding all of this water. We are affected by that, let's say, tide, the change of tides. That would be the simplistic way to explain it. Sometimes we don't sleep around the full moon. Sometimes we're really tired around the full moon. Every body is different, even though we all have about the same amount of water, even though we are all made up of the same chemical compounds. We are individually unique in what we are feeling and experiencing at that moment. That's something to keep in mind. So some of the physical sensations that I'm going to share, but it's not limited to, you might have felt in the last couple of days, or you might be feeling in the next couple of days. You might feel this all the time. I did a video on ascension symptoms. It's very similar. Not only is our body water, but our body is also electrical. So our body, think about the synapses that fire in our brain. Think about the electricity around the heart. What do they utilize in order to get our hearts going again? Electricity. So all of this is something to keep in mind. And the sun essentially has that charge that bursts through our body during these times and charges our body. Think about the ions in the air. Think about what the water does, the sun does for our crops. Think about what it does for the water in the oceans. So our body is a body of water and electricity. So we are going to be impacted potentially by these solar storms. And I want to just give a disclaimer. I'm not going to be talking necessarily about the difference between CMEs, solar flares, filament eruptions, or whatever it was I just said a minute ago. You can look up the video on that on your own. It's fascinating. I always mix them all up. So I don't know exactly if this is a CME, a solar flare, etc., etc. I just want to talk about the overall picture of this. I shared a video in my community on the posts. If you want to go back and check that out, it's an awesome video about all that. And I will also share the link. Thank you, Joshua, my dear friend and brother, for sending that. Okay, it's very informative. And so back to that. I'll get to the earth changes in just a moment. So physically, we respond to this activity from the sun. Some of the responses, again, that are not limited to this are thirsty. We might be more thirsty than usual. We might have trouble sleeping. We might be exhausted and totally wiped out. We might have both. And we might be really, really high, super, meaning we can't sleep, and then more exhausted the next day. Or vice versa. We might have been exhausted one day and then the next day we're just super energized like the Energizer Bunny. We may get what I refer to as the body quakes. It's this little vibration that we get in the body, almost like we've had too much coffee, but it feels like it's coming from the inside out. We might feel heightened tingles and electricity in the body, especially for those of you who are really sensitive. More headaches come up. Dizziness, seeing more things out of the corner of our eyes than we usually do. Or if we've never seen them before, that can happen. And maybe I'll talk about that down the road as well. A feeling of lightheadedness, feeling slightly off, but you're not quite sure why. Spaciness, not being able to focus. Should I keep going? I guess I should. There's more. I could probably put together a list. The first thing I want to say as a disclaimer, because this is, again, about empowerment, is if you're feeling any of those things, and you could just be feeling those things in general, it may not be directly related to the sun, it's okay. This too shall pass. And not getting into a place of fear about this stuff. And that's something I'll probably do another video about. We go through these things, our body changes. It's that simple. Not being in a place of what's wrong with me or what does this mean is really important. Riding this wave and just recognizing that this is just part of our journey here on Earth. Our physical body is going through something and we just need to give it whatever it needs for support. A lot of these videos I do, I'm always talking about things we need to support our system. So think about, what do I need to support my physical vessel? And then maybe double it during these cycles, during these solar phases. Do more to support ourselves. Drink more water. Add more minerals. And by the way, this is not medical advice. None of my videos are medical advice. So if you're really having a lot of heart palpitations, that's something else that can happen. Heart flutters. Sometimes more water and electrolytes can make that go away, because sometimes that is a sign of dehydration, just so you know. The same with lightheadedness and the same with dizziness and the headaches. If it continues, go to the doctor. Do your due diligence to make sure that it's not something more serious. I've done all of that, you guys. I've gone through this so many times that I'm just aware, okay, it's time for me to ride this wave. I did a video on riding a wave like a week or so, and I think I was pre-waving this solar flare activity. So we can go a little deeper and a little woo-woo, which I'd like to do certainly in this video. So what are the effects of that? And I always say, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So we can feel more anxious. We can feel as if we've had that cup of coffee and haven't eaten yet to get the jitters. which can make us feel a bit more on edge. We can feel edgy, maybe not as patient, right? A little bit more quicker to come to be more reactionary. So the other way to mitigate this is breathe. Taking some deep breaths, asking ourselves, what do I need to do to support my body today? Am I more thirsty right now than usual? Because if we're not embodying this, we're not paying attention to how I feel right now. And that leads me back to what I've always shared about acknowledging and realization. So we have to acknowledge how we're feeling in order to realize there might be something going on that I need to pay attention to. A lot of people aren't there, you guys. A lot of people are just in this body, but they're not in touch with the body. So they might be driving along and they haven't drank any water all day. They're off in la la land. They don't feel good. And lo and behold, they have a fender bender. More car accidents can happen. I see way more aggressive drivers when there's heightened solar activity. Yesterday alone, and I told my friends this, I actually told a couple clients this, be careful driving today. Be careful driving yesterday, which was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and any time. It'd be nice if the weathermen were talking about this and the weather women, right? The weather people, because it's like, all right, we've got a full moon, guys. Pay attention when you're on the road. Same thing with solar activity. I saw, I always see bad drivers, but I saw a lot of potential car accidents yesterday, and one was so close, I kind of, and thankfully they avoided each other, but it was that close to this person just not paying attention and almost rear-ending this other person. And then I did see a car accident that had just happened, and then there was another car accident so my point is, I don't usually see a ton of car accidents on my drive. Yesterday I saw 3 potentials of 2 major ones. Okay, so there it is. So it's heightened. And so again, what came first, the chicken or the egg? We might be feeling all of this stuff, or even just a couple of those things, and it may make us feel anxiety because we're reacting to what we're feeling. And that can lead to worse situations. It can lead to us having more cortisol go up in the body, which can lead us to having heart issues, right? So recognizing that, balancing that out so that we don't make it worse, right? It's empowering us to do something to change that. Vice versa, we might have already been anxious, and now this happens and it makes it worse, right? So recognizing all of these things, the patterns that we're feeling, and it might be that we need to take the day to relax. Some of the other things are, I think I already said this, but apologies if I'm repeating myself. Water. If you're prone to anxiousness, if you're prone to anxiety, if you're prone to headaches, realize that. Drink a lot of, whatever you need to do. But one of the things I'm seeing is ocean water. Salt water can be very helpful. Epsom salt soak. Make sure it's a quality Epsom, not just, if you can. I buy this really big bag of nice organic or Epsom salts that come from a good resource. The ocean, of course, a swimming pool, but rivers and streams are really valuable right now to help kind of move the energy. And it's ionization, right? What happens when we're charged up, right? The more water we have in the system, the better. The more water we have on our skin, the better. And that connection creates a sense of calm. So that's the easy, kind of in a nutshell, suggestions that I would have for everyone watching. And you might have some suggestions as well, and I encourage you to share them in the comments. I'm not always good at responding to the comments right away, but you guys can read each other's comments, and this is a community, so whatever you have that might be helpful for someone else, throw it out there. And And this is something that more and more people are talking about, which makes me really excited. I follow a couple people on Instagram that talk about it. What I really want to reiterate is we can get caught up in, and I joke all the time, like, oh, it's a solar flare. You're feeling this because of the solar flare activity. And while that is true, if you're feeling a lot of this all of the time, it might be something to kind of look into a little deeper. And that's another video. I already mentioned being out of fear about this. So don't feed into the fear. Not only will that enhance the cortisol in your own body, the stress hormone that causes a lot of issues. But I want to talk about that. I'm going to share screen in just a minute and share a couple things about solar flares and a couple things that are very science-based. And then the end of the video, I'm going to get to the woo-woo. Well, right now I'm going to get a little bit to the woo-woo. From my perspective, I use this energy and I ride the wave. And I actually will get up at 3 a.m. and journal. I will get really creative during this time. It's harder for me to focus, so I find my extrasensory ability going into a lot of stuff. So I have started to kind of try to coordinate what I do based around if I feel, because I sense the solar flare when it's happening at the same time. And while certain scientists would say that's not possible, we won't feel this for 3 days, it's going to affect us in 5 days, I will share from my own physical experience as an intuitive, that's how it works for me. I can sense when it happens, when that filament erupts. It's like a charge, it's quantum. We are quantum beings, we are interwoven in the tapestry of reality. So you might be one of those that's going, well, I felt this a couple days ago. I call it pre-waves. I pre-wave a lot of these events, a lot of these things that happen. There's no real time, so to speak. Although, for some of us, we do feel it right when they say we're going to feel it, when it impacts the earth. The earth impacts are right now. But I utilize that energy and I get really creative. I didn't say this earlier, but movement can be very powerful. I teach something called intuitive movement. It's actually moving intuition, but you could just do yoga. You could just do Tai Chi, Qigong. Those are all wonderful things. I just had a session yesterday with a beautiful client who I saw that could be really powerful for them specifically. For other people, that's not going to help right now. It's just being still and breathing, being really calm, allowing that breath to calm the nervous system and move through the body. Massage can be very helpful right now. For this client, I recommended tapping for their partner. So tapping, vibrationary tools. So just all of these things to move the energy through the system is important. And again, back to the journaling, I will get up, I stretch, I will do yoga, I will do my moving intuition, which is essentially me moving how my body tells me it wants to move. It's that simple. But for some people, it's difficult. What does that look like? What does that feel like? So for you, it might be easy. What else? And I'll put a huge cup of water by my bed. I get a lot of people when I tell them that, they're like, well, then I have to get up and use the restroom a couple times a night. If you don't have a schedule the next day, I would invite you to ask yourself, what's more important? Me waking up a couple times in the night? And if you have kind of your own schedule, that might be something that you might want to ask yourself, why does that really matter if this is more important? And you can ask yourself about a lot of things. I do that a lot, like, is this an old habit pattern? If I don't need to wake up early, then what difference does it make? So just recognize that this too shall pass. Doesn't mean you're going to have to do this every night, but maybe you'll have to wake up a couple times and go to the bathroom. If it means that you're not going to pass out the next day or feel dizzy or be grumpy, then it's definitely worth it to make some of those changes that are what our body is asking for. So I'll drink a huge thing of water. I use a little bit of salt. You can use Celtic salt or pink Himalayan salt are my favorite. And I put a little bit of that in my water and I drink that throughout the night. And then eventually, when I've expelled that energy, I go back to bed. And I talk about this through our journey of ascension or expansion or evolution. Sometimes we're activating those really, it's starting to get lighter outside, so I'm gonna turn down my light. We're starting to activate those things inside of us that want to be expressed. Our body, it's not that we have to block what's going on. So I'm going to talk woo-woo for a moment because I can't help myself. For me, this is activation. Our sun is actively doing something to the earth. We are on the earth, actively co-creating with the earth, utilizing all of the elements, including the sun, the planets, the chemicals, and the elements that are in the structure of the earth body, that are connected to our body. So it could be that at some point we are activating more of our human potential. So that's something to be aware of and to recognize. You know, a lot of what we want to expand, we want to open our intuition, we want to, be telepathic or whatever it might be for those of you woo-woos out there. Most likely if you found this channel, you might be a little woo-woo. Yet then these types of things happen and it can bring up fear. It can bring up a feeling of, ooh, what is this? I don't know what this is. And we can feel these sensations so much, right, that it can make us feel fearful. So that's another, I'm just going to keep reminding everybody of that. So I utilize it for my creative stuff. And that's different for everyone. You might want to get up and paint. That might be your thing. You might have an aha of something that you hadn't thought about and you were thinking about, and all of a sudden you get an answer. So these are all things to keep in mind. It's not all negative. I find this positive. I find this part of where the cycle that we're in right now. And I do follow some people that talk about this being, a potential disaster. There's always going to be someone out there who is projecting that fear. And I'm not saying that isn't a potential down the road, that the sun is going to, eventually the earth will do this or the sun will do that. I want to just gently remind everybody that we are co-creative beings, and the more energy and focus that we put into something, project energetically, the more we build that idea together, the more that thought pattern becomes a thing. Have you ever heard thoughts become things? My dear friend Kat was just sharing this we just had an incredible conversation about that, about thoughts. But yes, they do. It is an energetic frequency that is essentially we are collectively creating. So the more we buy into something, give value to something, and I always talk about this, so apologies for being redundant, but the more it becomes real. So recognizing that we are creative beings, I would invite everybody to not continue to just believe something that somebody is telling us, whether they are a scientist or not. That doesn't mean we put our heads in the sand and pretend like what they're telling us doesn't exist. There's always a potential when enough people believe in something. So these potentials are out there. That doesn't mean we should be afraid of those potentials, is all I'm saying. So how we respond to that information is really key. And it takes me into more of that because I'm being called to share. Well, if you are one of those people that does think bad things are going to happen, well, then that's an even bigger reason for us to take advantage of what's right now in this moment, get into our hearts, find a place of coherence, and be as fun-loving and joyful as we can while we have this time together on earth. Looking at it that way, how can I live my best life if things are really going to lead us down that path tomorrow. The poles are going to shift and everything's going to be flipped and there's going to be a flash of light. Okay, what am I doing to best support myself and my fellow humans during that? So that's just something to keep in mind. Getting out of fear about that. Okay, earth changes. So this does create, there is a scientific fact, and it has been proven that the more solar activity we get, the more earthquakes we have. So you can look that up if you feel called to. So if you're in an area where it's earthquake, California, I lived in California for years, be prepared. It doesn't have to be fearful of it. I've been told my whole life the big one's coming in California. So if you're in an area where earthquakes happen, have some water and some supplies available. Just like if you live in a state that natural disasters happen on a regular basis, or if you're up in the mountains and there's mudslides, or if you're in a place where there's tropical storms and hurricanes, you prep for it. So would be a good idea to have things in your car and your house, such as water and an emergency kit in case you cut yourself and you can't get to the store. Things like that. So just be aware of that. By the way, I'm not saying like there's a solar storm coming, go get prepared. It's already here. But this is good to know for future reference. And it's just good to have that for peace of mind on a regular basis. So that we don't buy into this, mass propaganda that sometimes happens when these events occur. So earthquakes, and by the way, when I say mass propaganda, we might see, because of this energy, more things on television that are a direct reflection of increased anxiety, fear, confusion. Recognizing that during this time frame, there might be a lot of that. So don't buy into the hype. Prayer and meditation can be very powerful all of the time. So all of this stuff that I'm sharing with you guys right now in response to solar activity is really something we should be doing every day. We should be focusing on all the time. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. We just maybe could focus on enhancing that around the time of a solar flare. If you're one of those beings, humans, who really just kind of feel chill all the time, awesome. Share the love. Be that chill anchor for other people around you who may not be able to tap into that right now. And in general. So heightened stuff going on the world stage, earthquakes, and that can lead to other things as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the science just for a moment, and I'm gonna have to keep hitting pause record. I don't know how to mute the recording stopped, so apologies on that, but here we go. Hold on a second. Okay. I was gonna try to find some things, but I would just invite you guys to look up whatever questions you have, just put it into your search button and just read about it to help educate some of the health stuff. It affects our circadian rhythms, it affects our blood pressure, if our cortisol goes up in our body. So I just looked that up and I wanted to reiterate all that. So also I talked about earthquakes. It can also affect our radio signals. So our satellites, so we can go through a little disruptive period as well during that. I didn't mention that earlier. All right, so I think I kind of covered a lot. I feel like maybe at this point you feel maybe hopefully a little bit more educated on at least the physical symptoms. Again, I'm not an educator on all of the scientific stuff, but it's really fun to read about, you guys. It's so beautiful to watch these solar eruptions. And again, just staying out of fear about that. And, recognizing that these things can kind of enhance what we're already feeling. Okay, where do I want to go with this? I think I'm going to end on that note, and then I'm going to do a part 2 video for you woo-woos out there, and I'm going to go into a state of flow about whatever, maybe a different perspective on what this is doing for us and how it might be helping us. In that state, I go into kind of a poetic, I'm going to read a poem that I wrote. I'm going to give a for instance about my creativity that comes online when this happens. So I'm going to grab that, I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to go into state of flow. So that's video 2 if you're interested in watching that. And in those videos, it's an energy share. So when I dip into this multisensory ability, I'm actually, I mentioned this earlier in the video, but everything is quantum. So energy healing, for instance, it's much like getting this interaction with the sun. We're all electromagnetic energy. So we are responding to this plasma, all of the elements, everything is responding to everything. So essentially it's enhancing our experience. So what I'm sharing in that type of way, and I'll announce this at the beginning of the next video, it is electromagnetic, it is quantum, it is a wave that essentially you can tune into and feel if you choose to. So in love and light, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope someone found this helpful, and namaste.